Welcome to another episode of Women in Family Business. We are WIFB, the global initiative for women to share their stories and expertise on matters related to the family enterprise. I'm joined in this discussion by my co-author Marina Vaughan Spitzy from Tecolote Advisory to discuss what we've learned about leadership, authority, and the unspoken challenges women face in family enterprises. This is a very special episode in which we launch our Women Empower report. It is based on a groundbreaking survey of 106 women from family enterprises around the world who shared their lived experiences. The numbers tell a compelling story. Only 70% of the respondents in this survey knew in advance that they would inherit ownership, while nearly half entered leadership roles unexpectedly, often to support their families. What does this mean for how family enterprises prepare the next generation? From informal entries to hard-won authority, we'll explore the patterns, the surprises, and the lessons that emerge from this global survey. Enjoy this episode with Marina. Maybe it's worth telling our listeners and viewers here a little bit more about what made you and I and other women feel the need to engage in this particular conversation. We are, for context, for listeners who'll be listening to this podcast episode further down the line, we are launching this in the context of very soon it being International Women's Day, and this is when we're launching the report. But I definitely think that we never set out to just create another gender study. Like for us, actually, this conversation is very much about leadership and what leadership should look like in the future in the context of family enterprises. Maybe we can share a little bit, Marina, like what our personal motivations are as to why we even went through this and why we felt the need to create this survey, and what it is I think that we felt has not previously been covered enough or in the right way when it came to this particular discussion.
Well, I think there are our personal experiences, and there's also I'd say professional experience or what we did with the last study. So one, this on a very practical level, this survey built on a study that we did based on 11 interviews with women leading family enterprises. And it came out with some surprising findings. 5 of the 11 women interviewed found themselves in a leadership position completely unexpectedly, for example. And there were, after this study, findings like that left us with questions such as, how common is this? But when we did that study, we didn't know that we would continue. But there were so often times that we thought, how common is that experience for women? How common that was what brought us together, this shared understanding, even though we come from different family enterprises, different involvements with our families, how often we had shared experiences. And in our conversations with families on a personal and on a professional level, so often there were questions from women saying, does anyone else go through this? Am I crazy? Or I wish I had known. And so we found ourselves in a position that, should we do more? And the answer was very clearly yes.
But let's tell everyone a little bit about the respondents, like, who responded to the survey. And you actually have a very interesting anecdote as well with regards to why some women that we asked to do this survey did not feel that it was relevant to them, which I always think is like one of the most interesting anecdotes that has emerged from this exercise. So let's talk a little bit more about who are these 106 women who did us the great honor in answering this survey for us.
It was so exciting to see answers coming in from all over the globe, from the US, Canada, Latin America, Southeast Asia, Australasia, Europe, Africa, North Africa, the Middle East. It was extraordinary. The responses were anonymous, but not only did we have a geographic spread, but we had different ages of respondents and also women from different types of family enterprises. So we had family businesses, we had respondents from family offices, we had women who shared assets in ownership within family structures and beneficiaries of trusts and Stiftungen. So we really had a spectrum of lived experiences with family, wealth, and responsibility. That was also so interesting that that breadth of response, also with those women who didn't feel that they were the right kind of respondents, that they fit our criteria. And our criteria was broad. It was, are you a member of a family enterprise with any kind of responsibility? And time and again, we would get back quips saying, oh, what about women with no power? Or, oh no, I don't own that. I'm a shareholder. And after I explained that we were still interested in hearing their experience as shareholders, because shareholders have a say in a family business, one of the family members wrote to me saying how she was not only moved, but felt quite angry with herself and with her family for not having made that authority more explicit before. And this goes back to what I said at the very beginning of our interview. This agency, it's not only up to us as individuals to grasp it, but it also comes from the system around us to help us realize that we have a responsibility also. And so with the survey respondents, then we're able to dig into what those experiences were or their understanding of their responsibility.
It really matters to what extent you've been prepared, to what extent you've had the expectation all your life. And I'm going to start with one of the more staggering statistics that we've discovered here. And that is that only around 17% of our respondents knew in advance that they would inherit ownership.
Mm-hmm. And then it was 9% of our respondents, despite that breadth of respondents, had a planned entry.
42% had what we called a sudden entry, meaning that circumstances dictated, and 44% had a gradual entry. But informality across the board was the norm. Most of these women had an extremely informal entry into the business. Yeah.
And that shows automatically from just the first stage of how these women entered their roles that the systems were not prepared to receive them. It's not even a question on whether the women were prepared or not. It shows that the system was not prepared to receive a successor.
No, because it was not from the get-go, admittedly wasn't prepared to absorb whoever was going to come in. So it's interesting, right? Like to see also like how we enter really informs what the experience afterwards looks like. And as you said, the nature of entry, that one's been really interesting. And I think here there's this talk about why informality is sort of like been the nature of even the planned succession that we've seen here, maybe deserves a bit of elaboration.
I would go on from there to talk about the role ambiguity. You know, you were talking about this relational quality of why women were joining because they wanted to help their families or there was a need. But there's a knock-on effect of coming into a role, often through an unplanned path or unexpectedly, but also with little clarity around the role. It has effects on the position. And so when that position is undefined, it lowers your confidence because you're starting off questioning, what should I be doing? What is expected of me? What is needed right now? And what am I allowed to do? Not only that, that delays the authority. When you don't know what you're supposed to be doing, it's very difficult to be able to assert yourself. And that's not just bad on the individual, it's bad for the system because it makes others around you question if you have the authority, it undermines your legitimacy.
And this is like, to be very clear, it's just the statistical probability that it would go that way was just extremely high for all respondents. Like it looked like, you talked about role ambiguity. 66% of our respondents did not have their role clearly defined when they joined the family enterprise. When we asked them, how did you define the role over time? 75% said, well, it was just learning on the job. 45% said that they're still figuring it out. But let's also talk, Marina, about how, because a lot of these women stayed and made incredible successes of this. This is definitely not a victim's narrative. Like this is not like a sad narrative. Like most of these women have done incredibly well, have changed their family enterprises to a great extent. So let's talk a little bit more about what it is that we've seen in terms of like how they manage to find their place, become effective, but also what it is that they fundamentally changed and addressed in their family enterprises.
I think one of the most interesting findings about what they changed is they changed from what they had had from experience. They wanted more clarity for the next generation. They went in and said, that was not the best way to handle things. I'm going to make it better for the next generation. So they've led from this memory of what was missing, not from this assumption of what was sufficient. And I think that is really, really telling. And they have built this credibility, not with using shortcuts, but with improving the system so that the system is better prepared to support the next generation of leaders. They have found peers, mentors, outside advisors. They champion other women, and they are more willing to ask for help for themselves too, and find what it is that they need to succeed by building their system and by getting the support from outside.
And I think this is like two quotes here that we have also in the report, which really reflect that feeling. I became more ambitious as I saw what was possible. And at first, I wanted to fit in. Now I want to transform. That's probably one of my favorites. So, this kind of like comes full circle as to like why we did this survey in the first place. So I don't know if you wanted to maybe say a little bit more about what it is that you'd expect from the systems and like what you'd like family enterprises to take up from this report.
I think it's not wrong to want to support your family. It's not wrong to step up and to step in, especially when you love people, you have an emotional connection. But it's also fair to ask for a clear role, because it doesn't just help establish your understanding, protecting you and helping you to give back to your family, but it protects the roles and relationships between siblings, between different branches, between those stepping into roles from a family and employees. So clear roles and expectations. It's right to be able to ask for constructive feedback, for example. And this all comes from transparency about expectations. On a more developed role, one can have professionalized governance. Professionalized doesn't mean that you need to have a family charter or a constitution. We don't even go into that in the report. But it's about having really discussed roles and expectations in the family. And that can be in whether there are pathways into leadership, into understanding how communication works at a family level and at a shared asset or at a responsibility level. It's about knowing what's expected at different ages and at different times. And when in doubt, get an outside person to come in and tell you you're not crazy, or to share their experiences, whether that's in from peers, whether it's coaching. If it's getting a mediator to come in and help you navigate family tensions. I don't know, which ones have I missed? They're not gender specific, are they? They're really
They're not at
human
all
needs.
gender specific, but this is also like part of the adjustment of our thinking. Just because something has women in the title or has word power in the title, it does not mean that, the gender agenda is the only element here. What we're essentially saying, like, we are documenting underrepresented content and thought leadership and experiences in order to get a fuller picture of how the family enterprise actually works. And I think this is something that we have to be very honest about. If not everybody's story is told, if not everybody's experience counts, you will never get a fully comprehensive understanding of what actually makes or doesn't make your family enterprise function and work. And so for us, this is really like an appeal to everyone to read this report, whether you feel addressed or not. We stand by the choice of name because we think it's like a celebration of and a thank you to the respondents, because we see their power, even if sometimes they don't see it themselves. And we acknowledge their agency, even if they struggle at times themselves. But we see what they've done and we see what they've achieved. And we wanted to give a celebratory nod to the fact that, in fact, you are a woman in power if you've answered this survey. And there are many of them out there. And we hope that this also encourages you that, you're not alone in your experience, but that this also gives you the groundwork to go to your family and say, guys, we have work to do. We can do better, and quite easily so.
The women are ready. Now, how can the systems get even better at preparing for them and supporting them?